Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. Glad to see everyone was able to come. So in a couple days, it's going to be a Magha Puja day. So Magha Puja is one of the most important holy days of the year for in Southeast Asia for Theravada Buddhists. So this one lands on the full moon in the month of Magha. So not the most creative name for it, but all of our holy days basically, our big ones basically are just named after the month they're in. So kind of our biggest main holy day of the year for Buddhists is what's called Visakha Puja. So that usually falls in May, and that's to commemorate the birth, the enlightenment, and the parinibbana or the death of the Buddha. And so that one's also kind of known as like the Buddha Day because it's all about, the Buddha, the important things of the Buddha's life. And the next holy day we have is called Asalaha Puja. So this usually falls in July. And this one is to commemorate the first teaching of the Buddha, the first time he gave a discourse when he gave this. It's called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So the discourse on the turning of the wheel of Dhamma. And in that discourse, he gives us the real foundations of Buddhism, the real foundations of Dhamma, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Middle Way. And so this one is known as the Dhamma Day because it's when he first started teaching the Dhamma. He set forth the Dhammacakkappavattana, literally means like setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma. So this is the Dhamma Day. But some important things on that day happened too, as far as the Sangha. This is when the Buddha first ordained monks. And the first time he also had his first disciple to become enlightened, to become a Sotapanna. So an important day for that too. But today, being Magha Puja, this is the Sangha day. So this is the day where we commemorate this occurrence which happened in the life of the Buddha, this really special event. So this is something they say only happens one time in the life of a Buddha. So it was on the full moon in the month of Magha, and 1,250 monks who were all enlightened, all fully enlightened arahants, and they had all been ordained by what's called the Ehi Bhikkhuhi ordination. So nowadays, if a monk wants to ordain, you have to get a whole sangha of monks together, and it's a bit of a ceremony. There's some chanting. There's this whole process, and there's a whole like legal way about doing it. So it's a bit of a process. Doesn't take too long, but it's still a bit of a process, and you need this group of monks. But in the very beginning of when the Buddha started teaching, he was the only monk in the beginning. He was just the Buddha. So when he would ordain people, he would say to them, "Ehi bhikkhuhi," which means like "come bhikkhu," and that was their ordination. That was it. After that, they were ordained. They were a full monk, and the Buddha is the only one who is allowed to do that type of ordination. And so, of course, everything that was much quicker, much easier, but it only existed for this very short period at the beginning of the Buddhism. So at the beginning of the Buddha's teaching. And then later on, it became more of the ceremony. So these 1,250 arahants who all fully enlightened, all ordained in this, all got together without prior arrangement or chatting with each other. They all just happened to come together to see the Buddha on the full moon in the month of Magha. So sometimes, when people hear this, they think, "Wow, I mean, that sounds a little out there." I remember once we had this junior monk, and he had some doubts about that. He's like, that sounds really out there that, they'd all get together. There's no prior arrangement. They're all enlightened. But it's actually much more not so out there. It's actually very I believe it happened and is very plausible to happen. So at the time of the Buddha, with not just with Buddhism, but in all the different spiritualities at the time. A lot of times on the full moon and the new moon, it was a tradition for the monastics or sadhus or whatever different type of we'd call them samanas or like recluses or non-householders. So religion, people ordained in some type of belief or religion, it would just be a custom for them to get together on the full moon or new moon because at that time in India, they didn't use a solar calendar. Everything was run on the lunar calendar. So this would kind of be like the Sunday, but it's a Sunday which happens only once every 2 weeks. So there was already that tradition to get together. But also at the beginning of when the Buddha first started teaching, the first disciples he had, it wasn't just like just kind of like normal guys like you and me, who he started teaching. He really intentionally went out and started teaching people who were already very like high level practitioners, high level meditators. So the first group he went out to teach were these five ascetics, which he had practiced with before he became the Buddha. So he already knew that these monks knew how to meditate. They already had a lot of wisdom. They were almost there, so it didn't take that much to teaching to kind of get them over the edge, to get them to become enlightened. And then afterwards, he was teaching these other ones. And this one big group he taught, they were these fire worshippers. And there was these three brothers, the Kassapa brothers, and they were the teachers of this group of 1,000 fire worshippers. And the Buddha went and taught them and, converted them to Buddhism, got them to become enlightened. But again, they were already really, really high and skilled meditators as it was. And the teaching that the Buddha gave that group is called the Fire Sutta or the Adita Pariyaya Sutta. So this is considered again one of the three main cardinal suttas. So you have these three teachings that the Buddha gave right at the beginning in the first year of being enlightened. The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first teaching. The next one is called the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, or the Sutta of Not Self. And the third one is this one, the Fire Sutta, and the Fire Discourse. So after teaching these fire worshippers, these ascetics about this sermon, this teaching, a lot of them did but end up becoming enlightened, and eventually they all became enlightened. So so yeah, at the beginning of the Buddha's sasana, the Buddhist religion, it was a lot of the monks were all enlightened, and it was already this custom for them to come together. But that being said, it is considered a very important event, something that only happens at one time in the life of the Buddha. And so on this occasion, the Buddha gave this really pivotal teaching to this 1,250 monks. He gave this teaching, which is called the Ovada Patimokkha. So it's sometimes like the teaching in brief, like this brief exhortation, or the Patimokkha in brief. So so in this teaching, it's very short. I believe it's 12 lines long. It's a very, very short teaching, but it has a lot of really great fundamental Dhamma teachings in it. And it's one of the ones that, we feel is so important and has such good teachings in it that, even today we still chant it. It's in the chanting books, the mornings and evenings, it comes up in the chanting. And so it's a really great teaching in there. And some of the most famous lines from this, which get quoted a lot, is the first few lines of it, kind of the first verse of it. And so it's sabba papa sa akaranam, to avoid doing any evil, kusala supa sampata, to be committed to the good, sacha kiryo dapanang, to purify one's mind, etang buddhana sasanang. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. So again, these first few lines have these really, really great dhammas, great teachings in them. One of the things you really get it is that last line when the Buddha said, this is the teaching of all Buddhas. That really emphasizes this understanding that the Buddha didn't create Dhamma. He didn't create these teachings. This isn't his personal like success method. It's not like the Buddha's 7 habits of highly effective people or anything like that that the Dhamma, becoming enlightened, being able to go beyond all suffering, this is just a universal law. This has always been there. It will always be there. This is just this potential, this thing that all of us can do. And so the Buddha just discovered how it's done. And so it's not his personal teaching. He's just teaching what he's discovered. So he says, all the Buddhas will teach like this, and this will be the things all the Buddhas teach. It's not just him. It's a universal thing. But if we go back to that first line, to avoid doing any evil. So this is the translation we have in our chanting book. And sometimes the translations in the chanting book are kind of a little um, they try to get the balance between being super accurate and chantable. So some people, like when they come new to Buddhism, when they come new to Dhamma, they don't like hearing words like evil because they may have a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma around words like this or preconceptions around this. The word that's actually used is uh, papasa. So it's like papa. It's just like you can translate as unwholesome, bad. So it's really avoiding to do all those unwholesome things, those bad things in life. So we're avoiding doing those things which, are going to harm ourselves, which are going to harm other people. So at the very core of that for lay people, we'd say this is like sila, like which is actions of body and speech. So those things we do, those things we say. So the very core of that would be the 5 precepts. So to avoid killing living beings, to avoid stealing, taking what's not given, to avoid sexual misconduct, to avoid false speech, like lying, intentionally lying, and to avoid intoxicants. It's like drugs and alcohol. But this is really this isn't like a be all and end all of what is unwholesome, what are like bad actions. This is the bare minimum to do. So we can always take that much higher, and so as I always say, it's not killing is the base limit, but it's not hurting other people. So you don't want to be hitting people. You don't want to be, there's a whole lot you can do. And as I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, it's the speech is a big one too. Like it's not just avoiding lying. It's, avoiding harsh speech, malicious speech, frivolous speech. Like Lumpur Biek would always say when he's talking about this, about right speech, he's like, yeah, it's like avoiding swearing at your mom. And so like, so taking that up. And with all of our actions, it's really, we're trying to take that up. We're trying to really avoid doing these unwholesome actions because these unwholesome, unskillful actions they're really going to harm us. They're going to bring the level of our mind down. They're going to harm other people and really create a lot of suffering in our own lives. We see how much people when they are uh, doing these unwholesome things, how much it affects them. It affects their mind because everything we do, everything we say, everything we read, everything we listen to, it all comes in and it all has an effect on our own minds. And we can all look at this in our own life and in our own experience, how we've seen people, especially once we start getting a little older, and we can see people who over time, how much they've changed. Because again, like, the Buddha said, there's these 3 characteristics of all existence. Everything is unsatisfactory, everything is subject to change, and everything is not self. This is all the conditioned in the conditioned world. And so, we're always changing. And you can see sometimes people who we've known who have changed and their behavior was unwholesome, and they weren't avoiding to do bad things. And you can see how much a lot of them have gone down. They're not as happy as they were before. They're more stressed, they're more angry, or maybe we've seen it in our own lives when we've been through a rough period like that. So the Buddha really encouraged us to avoid doing those bad things, avoid the unwholesome things. And then on the flip side, he he encouraged us to do the good things. So this isn't so doing the good, doing the wholesome actions. That's not just avoiding unwholesome actions. There's a lot of really good, wholesome things we can do. Part of it is keeping sila, like keeping this level of morality, this level of good behavior by our body and speech. It's actually really interesting in the suttas when the Buddha was talking about the five precepts. He said that these are gifts. When you're keeping these five precepts, this is a gift you're giving to other people. He said you're giving them the gift of fearlessness. So, and when you really think about this, if you're not, say, for example, you're not killing, you're not harming, people don't have to be worried around you. They don't have to fear around you. You don't steal, they don't have to worry about their stuff when you're around. They can leave their stuff unintended. They know you're not going to take it. You're not practicing sexual misconduct. Either your partner or other people are okay with you being around their partners. They know you're not going to cheat on anybody. Avoiding lying. This one is, again, I think this is a really big one. You can really see this in life. You're someone who's trustworthy. You speak truthful, you speak nicely. People are going to listen to what you say. They're going to believe what you say. But, we've all seen those people in life where, maybe they have a bit of a problem with lying. And it gets to the point where, they tell you something and you're just like, I don't even know if I should believe that, it's some, he lies, there's a good chance it's not true. And then, of course, with say intoxicants, it's if someone they don't have to worry that you're gonna go get intoxicated and then break one of the other precepts or do or say something wrong. So when we practice these, we're really giving other people this um, gift of fearlessness. They can live at ease around us. They don't have to worry about us. But then we can go on and practice more wholesome things. So we can practice stuff like generosity, being giving, being generous. And that doesn't just mean with material things. Of course, material things are very good. We can give food, we can give, whatever. But it can also be giving our time, giving effort, that I guess, I guess, here in Canada right now, it's winter. So you can be that person, you go shovel your neighbor's sidewalk for them, and that's just a really good wholesome thing to do. And it creates these positive, wholesome feelings in you. And that so it's a really, really good thing to do. You're raising the level of your mind, you're raising this wholesome happiness for yourself and for everyone around you, because it's always nice when someone does something nice for us, someone shovels our walk for us. It's like, oh, actually, that's really nice. You really, really helped out. You really saved some time. So the Buddha encouraged us to do the good things because again, it has nothing but benefit for ourselves and for everyone around us. But then he really encouraged, and then the third one is to encourage us to purify our minds. And so this is really when we take it up to that next level. The first two were all about stuff that like external things we do, stuff we do with our body and with our speech. So, avoiding doing certain things, but it's all external. But this next one, to purify one's mind, this is internal. This is when we're really working on our mind. And sometimes, again, people coming new to Buddhism, coming from uh, maybe other beliefs or other religions or whatever uh, path they've come from. Sometimes again, there's a bit of like baggage around words like purity or you have to be pure. And so to purify the mind, again, this is just it's just like making it clean. It's getting rid of those unwholesome things in our mind and really encouraging and developing the wholesome things in our mind. So this is where a lot of the Buddhist teachings come focus on this of us really making the mind bright and happy and pure in a wholesome way. So one of the things we really focus on is, we try to prevent unwholesome mind states from arising in our mind. So we're trying to avoid anything with greed, anger, delusion, jealousy, all the manifestations out there, of all these different negative mind states and emotions we can have. We don't want to do stuff to encourage them to come up. We want to try to prevent them. So this can be in certain ways we live our lives and just certain things we put our mind, put the attention on. Um, and then when those but inevitably they do come up until up until we're really enlightened, they do come up once in a while. So when an unwholesome mind state does come up, what we want to do is we want to get rid of it. We want to remove it as quick as possible. When I was a junior monk, I stayed with Lumpur Mahamon, and he was one of the most senior disciples or students of Lumpur Cha. And so when I was there, he was quite old. He was in his late 70s, and he uh, he didn't speak English, but he had a few little English sayings. And at that time, I didn't speak Thai, and even at the monastery, there wasn't much Thai spoken. It was all Isan, which is this dialect of Lao, which they speak in northeast Thailand. And so I didn't really understand a lot of what was going on in the monastery, but Lumpur Mahamorn had a few of these little teachings in English. So one of the ones he'd say, let it go, get it out. And so it's a really great one. So when these, unwholesome things do come up into our mind, we do work on it. If we can just let it go, not put our attention on it, just let it arise and pass away. But sometimes we do have to really actively get it out. So and actively work on letting go of it. So we can do this through, developing our mindfulness, developing the opposite of it. So if anger comes up, we can bring up that loving kindness, that metta that we've been practicing, or sometimes just reflecting on the thought itself, reflecting on, how this is making you feel. Is this impermanent or not impermanent? So we have all these different skills we've developed to get it out. But one of the things then is we want to not just get rid of unwholesome thoughts, we want to actively bring up wholesome thoughts into our mind. We want to bring up these wholesome, happy things that, are going to give us this really like blameless, wholesome happiness. So, so we can actively work on either bringing up just mindfulness, because mindfulness itself is considered a wholesome mind state. It's very neutral, but it falls under the wholesome one, where we can bring up, loving kindness. We can bring up, start contemplating a type of wisdom object. So just bringing up something good and wholesome into the mind. And when we do have that in the mind, we want to work on continuing it and strengthening it and building it up. So it does become stronger, and it does stay in the mind much longer. And so these kind of three basic principles here, to avoid doing any unwholesome actions, any evil actions, to really work on doing good, wholesome actions, and to purify our minds. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. So this is the first few lines in this Ovada Patimokkha. And so today is or in a couple days, sorry, is the day that we Magha Puja, when we bring up this teaching. So it's very common in the monasteries that I've stayed at that, this is one of the ones we'll chant in the evening. And then usually there'll be like a circumambulation. So all the monks and lay people will, have flowers, candles, and incense. And they'll usually walk 3 times around if there's a chedi or a stupa in the monastery. If not, sometimes just around the main meditation hall in the monastery, just around something we take as like a good wholesome thing, and just doing this as an act of devotion, act of recollection of the day. Sometimes it's nice to just once in a while have a day which we make or is a little more special. It kind of creates some variety, some spice, can help us to remember certain other things. So remembering this Ovada Patimokkha teaching. And right now, we wouldn't be doing the circumambulation outside here. It's a little too chilly in wintertime. Um, but I would, yeah, I would like to offer this as a bit of a reflection for everyone this evening.